Congress here with my co-host Medea Benjamin. Grace Siegelman is helping navigate the tech for us. Thank you so much, Grace. And really thank you all for joining us tonight. It's going to be a terrific program, a very timely program with Francis Boyle and Sam Husseini. Francis Boyle being an international law professor who was counsel to Bosnia. So he knows all about the international law arena, the ICJ, the ICC, and Sam Husseini, independent journalist and analyst who has his own column on Substack, will be joining us also. So before we begin, I just want to remind everybody to please post in the chat your name if you want, your affiliation, where you're from, if you know who your congressperson is, that too, please. And respect the norms, which are to show respect for everybody, particularly our participants, and to show respect to others in the chat. And with that, we're going to turn to Medea for a few news updates. It's been a rough day on Capitol Hill. Tell us about it, Medea.
Well, it's been a terrible day on Capitol Hill. Anthony Blinken was testifying in the morning at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and in the afternoon at the Appropriations Committee. He's going to be testifying again on the House side tomorrow. This is about the budget. And of course, a lot of crying over, oh, your budget isn't big enough. What are you going to do? How are you going to do all this diplomatic work? Well, your budget is being cut 5%. And of course, we were there with our bloody hands. You might see my shirt, Bloody Blinken. And we had a number of people who got up and spoke out. But the police were particularly violent with us today. In fact, 2 of the people were charged with resisting arrest, which they did not do at all. And then in the afternoon hearing, it was awful because people were arrested for laughing. People were arrested for doing this when they walked out of the hearing. They were arrested for, others don't even know why they were arrested. One person, as she was leaving, said, "This doesn't represent my Jewish values," and immediately she was arrested. So they are really cracking down on us. And on the positive side, we might say it's because we're getting to them. And certainly Anthony Blinken looked quite annoyed when he was interrupted time and time again. But it was also very sad to hear him and his apologetic voice about and lies about Israel doing a better job now getting the humanitarian aid into Israel, which is just a big lie. And the issue that we're going to talk about tonight, the ICC, kept coming up with a number of the Republicans, particularly Lindsey Graham, just vowing that they were going to sanction the heck out of the ICC. And Blinken, do you agree? And Blinken was like, well, yes, we look forward to working with you on that. So it was a very sad day in Congress, and that's all that I can. And what I did want to say is that there is a very young, wonderful DC coordinator for CODEPINK, Julia Norman. You might see her on some of the social media that we do. A lovely, lovely woman who was arrested twice in the last week for not doing anything. And she is now being held overnight. So as we speak, she is in jail and she has now 2 charges against her. So I just feel so bad that a young woman like that, who only is there to try to stop people from being killed, will now have that kind of a record and has to go back to court and back again and again. So anyway, that was a very bad day in Congress today.
Well, that is one way of looking at it. I also tend to think that the level of repression is reflective of the level of concern that the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, the defense minister. And we know that Biden has been slamming these ICC arrest warrants and is totally complicit in this genocide, fueling it. And so this is hardball, right? They're taking this very seriously. And we just saw a Jewish woman on Democracy Now! Who worked for the Interior Department, I believe, quit her job in good conscience, saying that she can't be party to this. So they know that there's this growing movement challenging their complicity, and they're scared. I think they're scared. But anyway, we'll hear what our guests have to say about it. I just want to share a few headlines during these news updates. Okay, so Ireland is set to recognize Palestine as a state. That's supposed to come tomorrow. What else? Okay, a UN official is describing Rafah as hell on earth. The aid is not, Israel will not allow the aid in. No surprise there. Continues to attack Rafah, where people are crowded. Over 1 million people have been told to seek refuge there. They can't escape. Israel's communication minister says he's going to cancel the seizure of the broadcast equipment of Associated Press. Forget that. Okay, what else?
Marcy, don't forget the very vicious settlers who are attacking the humanitarian aid and trying to destroy it. We had a Senator Warner today telling us that no, it wasn't the settlers, it was Hamas that was taking the aid and not letting it get to people. So very parallel universe. But yeah, I hope people have seen those videos of those very vicious, violent thugs who are destroying the aid while the Israeli military just looks on and doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I think that people are seeing through the lies. Of course, others will be ensnared. But meanwhile, this normalization deal that was in the works between Israel and South Africa, I read that was also still being considered. But now,
you mean Israel and Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia, excuse me. No, not South Africa, Saudi Arabia. But I read today that is faltering again, because Israel does not want to recognize a Palestinian state and does not want to stop its genocide. There is also a headline that the ICC will be issuing more arrest warrants for leaders of Israel, and that the protests and the encampments that we see from one end of this country to another on university campuses, those are spreading to Finland, Denmark, Italy, Spain, France, Britain, Australia, and other countries. So with that, let's go to our program. And I want to ask and remind everybody to stay with us until the end, because we're going to be making those calls to Capitol Hill and sending emails, tweets, posting on Facebook to urge our representatives to publicly support, come out, speak up in support of these ICC arrest warrants of Netanyahu and Gallant and others from Israel who have been committing this genocide, to say it's time the United States upholds international law and joins the International Criminal Court. We are not a party to it. And to pledge to oppose any efforts that are now being pushed by Republicans to sanction the judges of the International Criminal Court, should they go along with the prosecutor's request for those arrest warrants. So with that, let's hear from our first guest. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Francis Boyle. He is a professor of international law at the University of Illinois College of Law. Francis served on the board of Amnesty International as counsel to Bosnia and Herzegovina and to the Provisional Government of the State of Palestine. He has represented 2 associations of citizens with Bosnia and was involved in developing the indictment for genocide and crimes against humanity and war crimes in Bosnia. He also drafted the U.S. domestic legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989, that was approved unanimously by both houses of the U.S. Congress and signed into law by President George H.W. Bush. Welcome, Francis Boyle, the CODEPINK Congress.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Marcy. And I just wanted to say I have been involved in the American peace movement since I was a teenager in high school opposing the Vietnam War. And here, a generation later, I have to say, in all honesty, Code Pink is the cutting edge of the American peace movement today. And I would certainly encourage everyone tuning in tonight to give whatever support you can to Code Pink. That being said, I have been asked to address both the proceedings at the International Court of Justice, where, yes, I did represent Bosnia, and also at the International Criminal Court. There I did, on behalf of my clients, the mothers of Srebrenica and Predrina, convince the prosecutor for the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, which is a predecessor to the ICC, to indict President Slobodan Milosević for almost every crime in the ICTY statute, war crimes, crimes against humanity, including 2 counts of genocide, Bosnia in general, and also Srebrenica in particular. I'll be discussing these as we go along. My reaction Monday morning when I saw the press conference and the documentation by Karim Khan is better late than never. After Operation Cast Lead by Israel against the people of Gaza concluded in January 2009, exterminating about 1,500 Palestinians, I advised Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to accept the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court for Palestine and the Palestinians, which he did do. And yet for 15 years and 3 prosecutors, the ICC did not lift one finger to help the Palestinians until Monday. And I hold the ICC accountable for all the death and destruction that Israel inflicted on the Palestinians since Operation Cast Lead until Monday, when they finally did act. I suspect under the circumstances they were embarrassed. Right now, the estimate is you have 36,000 dead, murdered Palestinians, 10,000 missing, 80,000 wounded. And if they didn't do something, they would have lost all credibility around the world, especially in the global South. So they did act. I won't go through all the charges here. You can read them on the ICC webpage, but basically war crimes, crimes against humanity, what I got against Milosević. Genocide was not included. Well, maybe it should have, but okay. At least Netanyahu and Gallant are indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The reports where he was also going to indict the chief of staff, Halevi. He should have been indicted. I don't know why he was not. Normally, in these types of situations, they go down the military chain of command, which in this case would be Netanyahu, Gallant, and then Halevi. But they have stated more indictments will be coming. So we will have to see what happens here. I really do not know. At this point, then, the prosecutor has submitted his evidence to a 3-judge panel for their review to decide whether or not to issue the warrants for all 5 individuals involved here, including the 3 leaders of Hamas. Now, the prosecutor has not released the evidence that publicly released the evidence that's still confidential. However, if you watch and follow and read the submissions that the Republic of South Africa versus Israel, in that case at the International Court of Justice, both the oral and written submissions, and also Nicaragua versus Germany for aiding and abetting genocide. If you read through all of their documentation and also attended all of their oral arguments, which I have, and read the 2 orders that the World Court issued and the one decision that the World Court issued for South Africa, you will see there's massive, overwhelming evidence of genocide, number one, and that would definitely include crimes against humanity, which is one step less in terms of severity under international criminal law, and also war crimes, which is one step less than genocide, crimes against humanity, and then war crimes one step less from crimes against humanity. And if you were following the accounts of the oral arguments between Israel and South Africa, they've had 2 rounds of provisional measures of protection oral arguments. Obviously, they were at odds, Israel denying all the claims made by South Africa. But the difference is this. The lawyers for South Africa and the lawyers for Nicaragua were very careful in drafting all of their pleadings and in making their oral arguments to adhere very closely to evidence adduced by organs and agencies affiliated with the United Nations organization. This is important, as I found in my litigation for Bosnia before the International Court of Justice against Yugoslavia. I did the exact same thing and won 3 orders. This is important because the World Court basically gives judicial notice to any facts adduced by any agency or organization or organ of the United Nations organization. So Israel can say whatever it wants to. Fine, they lie all the time anyway. I've argued with their lawyers and law professors ever since I entered Harvard Law School in 1971. So they lie all the time. But when it comes to objective fact-finding, I believe the International Court of Justice has relied, will rely on official UN sources. And if you listen to Mr. Khan, he's done the same, as well as had interviews, which the World Court has not had interviews. So I think in terms of the facts, based on this mountain of evidence that has been produced by South Africa and Nicaragua, the evidence is there. I'm sure massive pressure will be applied to the 3 judges on this panel to reject the request for the warrants by the United States, by Israel, by Zionists all over the world. Bribes, threat, intimidation, blackmail. You see what the U.S. Congress is proposing to do with the assistance of U.S. Secretary of State Blinken. He should know better. He went to Columbia Law School. Not that he gives diddly squat about international law and human rights. So we'll have to see what happens in their request for a warrant against President Putin. Of course, the ICC prosecutor hopped to it right away. When the great powers said jump, he said how high, and he got his indictments together very quickly and got a warrant, I think, within 4 weeks. So this could be soon. I really don't know. Finally, let me conclude. I've only been given, a limited amount of time to cover a lot of material here. I also think we owe a great debt of gratitude to South African President Ramaphosa and Foreign Minister Pandor. They have obviously given authority to their legal team to litigate this case at the International Court of Justice as aggressively as possible. I did the same thing myself. I won 3 orders for the Bosnians in under 6 months. Very aggressive litigation that had never been done in the history of the World Court since it was founded in 1921. And South Africa is now going for a 3rd order of provisional measures of protection, which would supersede my record for sure. More power to them. But the court adjourned on Friday. They are now considering how they should rule. Maybe we will have a ruling from them by the end of this week or early next week. I think the court has paid attention here to the actions by the ICC prosecutor. Let me conclude with one point, which is this, that the wheels of international justice turn slowly, but they do turn. I personally went after Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosević in the International Court of Justice in March of 1993 for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Then, acting on behalf of my clients, the mothers of Srebrenica and Podrina, starting in 2000, I got them indicted for almost every crime in the ICTY statute, including multiple crimes against humanity, war crime, and 2 counts of genocide. He did go on trial in The Hague. He filed a motion to dismiss the charges. That motion was denied. He was instructed to open his defense. Then he died. So we never got a final verdict of conviction there. But let me say this. If I could do that all by myself, we now have an army of international lawyers that I believe will be going after Netanyahu, Gallant, Halevi, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, maybe even the president of Israel, Herzog, who was condemned by the International Court of Justice for his genocidal statements. So this is just the start of a process, not only at the ICC, not only at the ICJ, but also this army of international human rights lawyers all over the world, even especially in the global South. And we need citizen support. We lawyers can't work miracles. We need citizen support from the grassroots, especially here in the United States of America. Back in 1986, I went in to complain to the second highest level officials in Israel's Department of War, Department of Justice, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs that they were committing Nuremberg crimes against the Palestinian people. And what was their defense? And eventually they didn't really disagree with me. They just said, we have public relations people in the United States who take care of these matters for us. That's all they really care about, public relations here in the United States. And that's why CODEPINK and other NGO organizations here are so important, especially these courageous and principled students all over the country, demanding accountability and demanding divestment. Well, at that, I think I've exhausted my time, Marcy, but I'm happy to take some questions. How about if you moderate them or something like that?
Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much, Francis Boyle, international law professor, former counsel to Bosnia, with us tonight as we talk about the International Criminal Court's arrest warrants, as well as South Africa's case before the International Court of Justice. Sometimes, Francis, perhaps you can clarify for people that the International Court of Justice is different from the International Criminal Court. And I do want to invite anyone who's with us, and I see that Robert Dresky in New York City is with us. He's been a fabulous ambassador for CODEPINK in New York City at the United Nations, organizing people to visit and to advocate for sanctions against Israel, for support for South Africa at the International Court of Justice. So tell us how the case at the International Court of Justice that South Africa has brought against Israel for genocide has laid the groundwork for these arrest warrants.
Right. Well, the International Court of Justice deals with disputes between states. It does not adjudicate international legal criminal accountability for individuals, although I'll return to that in a minute. The International Criminal Court and the court I dealt with, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, do adjudicate criminality of individuals. However, in the case of genocide, which I argued both at the World Court and at the ICTY, there is an intersection in the sense that states can commit genocide, which I argued at the ICJ successfully with those 3 orders, but also officials of states can commit genocide, which I argued before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. So there is an intersection here. One can feed over into the other. And indeed, in the my attempts to get Slobodan Milosević indicted by the ICTY, I did argue with the ICTY prosecutor the 3 orders I had won for Bosnia and Herzegovina on genocide to convince her to indict Milosević for genocide, Bosnia in general, and Srebrenica in particular, as well as war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Thank you.
Is that an adequate answer there? It's a very complicated question, but there's an intersection here because genocide is both a violation of international law committed by states, but on the other hand, it is also a violation of international criminal law committed by high-level officials of that state, such as presidents like Milosević was, prime ministers like Netanyahu, ministers of defense, the generals, etc. I went after Mladić, for example, in the International Court of Justice. Later, Mladić was convicted of genocide and everything else before the ICTY. I was not involved in the Mladić case.
So, Francis, I know that Medea has a question, and Sam Husseini, who's our next guest, our next featured guest, has his hand raised. So why don't we, Sam, you want to ask a question, and then we'll go to Medea?
Sure. I put it in the chat, but very simply, Francis, you mentioned the 3-judge panel. Do you see it being a profitable thing to try to influence them in any way?
I would think so, Sam, but in a very polite and respectful way, indicating to these 3 judges that they agree with the prosecutor and you believe the warrants should be issued. We see already the pressure on the other side, right, Sam? Today at the hearings where Blinken said he's going to work with the U.S. Congress to adopt sanctions on the ICC, which would include any judges who return a warrant. That is correct. By the way, one other point, Marcy, for sake of completeness, on Monday morning, there was a panel of experts on international law that had been consulting with the ICC prosecutor, most of them headquartered in Britain, but very distinguished jurists, and they put out a 13-page memorandum backing up what he was doing, including on jurisdiction. So, I'm not going to get into all those technical legal arguments on jurisdiction here, but certainly Khan saw there was jurisdiction because Palestine is a party to the Rome Statute, even though Israel is not. These crimes are taking place on Palestinian territory. There has already been a prejudgment by a panel that the court has jurisdiction over the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. But you can read their memorandum yourself. It is there. One other point I wanted to dispose of, as usual, Israel accuses anyone who criticizes them as being anti-Semitic. Let me say this. Ever since I entered Harvard in 1971, supporting the Palestinians, Zionists have accused me of being everything but a child molester. It just goes with the territory. But in this case, if you read the memorandum, one of the experts on there is Ted Marone. Ted was ahead of me at Harvard Law School. He got his LLM, SJD there. I got my JD, LM, SJD. That's reserved for foreign lawyers. But we had the same teachers. And back in those days, Harvard Law School was the #1 place in the world to study international law, international human rights, laws of war, international organizations. It no longer is today. I wouldn't send my dog to Harvard Law School. But in any event, the critical point about Ted is a Holocaust survivor. Let me repeat that. Ted is a Holocaust survivor. So how can you possibly say this indictment by ICC Prosecutor Khan is anti-Semitic when you have Ted, a Holocaust survivor, signing on to it? And in addition, after he fled Europe, he went to the Palestinian mandated area. He became legal advisor to the Israeli Foreign Ministry and wrote the memorandum saying the settlements were illegal because they violated the Geneva Conventions. So I think having Ted Marone on, I don't know anything about the ethnic or religious backgrounds of the other experts on there, but certainly Ted Marone is bulletproofing him from the spurious allegations that this entire enterprise is anti-Semitic. It is not.
That's so important. It's important, I think, for everybody to think about insulating themselves during these McCarthy-esque times. Let's bring in Medea Benjamin, co-founder of CODEPINK. I know Medea has some questions as well. And while she's entering this group, I want to just point out that the 3 judges, as I recall, one is from Mexico, another is from Romania, and another is from Benin. And perhaps we can revisit this idea of reaching out to them. And also, anyone who's with us tonight, if you want to join our World Court team, please do email me, Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, @codepink.org. Medea, question.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few questions that have come up in the chat, Francis. One is there any chance that Biden or anyone in the U.S. administration could be charged for providing the weapons? Another is this anything more than bad press and you can't travel to a couple of countries? Putin was charged and he doesn't seem to have slowed down from that. And then the final one is, what about the Hamas side of things? There were people who questioned why someone like Ismail Haniyeh was listed when he is not part of the military wing. He's more the political side of things and maybe didn't even know about October 7th. So I don't know if you want to take all 3 or whatever ones you want, but those were some questions that have come in.
Right. Well, on your first question, Medea, right. As you know, my friends at the Center for Constitutional Rights have filed a lawsuit out in the Bay Area against Biden, Blinken, and Austin. I've read the pleadings. It's meritorious. Indeed, the judge basically agreed with them on the facts, but said he didn't have jurisdiction. I think that's wrong, but it's now being appealed. But Biden was sued for aiding and abetting genocide against the Palestinians, which he is guilty of. This clearly violates Genocide Convention Article 3E, complicity in genocide. And also Biden was sued for violating the United States government implementing legislation for the Genocide Convention, known as the Genocide Convention Implementation Act. So yes, his culpability is there, as well as Blinken and Austin. They're at the, and I would say Sullivan. Indeed, it's appalling if you were watching the BBC, certainly on Monday, when Netanyahu and Gallant were indicted for international crimes. Sullivan was in there shaking hands with Gallant and Netanyahu. Well, Sullivan should know better. He went to Yale Law School. It's one of the top countries in the world, along with where I went. but he just doesn't care. Well, the issue is this: it's not just a question of not being able to travel or things of this nature, but all of Europe, almost every EU member state, is also a party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. And even though Britain, with Brexit pulled out, Britain is a party too. And so now all of these leaders are going to have to start distancing themselves one way or the other, certainly from Netanyahu and Gallant and some of the others. You'll note today President Macron came out and he said he fully supported the ICC. The Prime Minister of Belgium did the same thing. The Irish Prime Minister has taken a strong stand. So what we are going to see then are these European states that are parties to the Rome Statute re-evaluating their position towards Israel and the Palestinians, because they are going to have to, because they are party to the Rome Statute. And in the Rome Statute, if you read it, there is an equivalent to aiding and abetting. So they have to ask themselves, do I really want to cross the line here and subject myself to prosecution in my own states? Many of these Rome Statute states have domestic implementing legislation that make Rome Statute crimes under their domestic law. So they're now going to have to be considering quite seriously, to what extent are we going to cooperate with Netanyahu, Gallant for sure, and basically a criminal state. That, what can I say? As for the Hania, yes, I think that is somewhat problematic in the sense that normally these indictments do go down the military chain of command. So I have not seen the evidence that Hania is in the military chain of command, certainly Sinwar and DFAR. So I'm not sure. And conversely then, if he indicted Hania, I'm not sure why he didn't indict Halevi, the Israeli chief of staff, who's definitely in the chain of command. I hope that has answered those questions adequately.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Francis Boyle, I know you have to go. Francis has law papers to grade. He's also a working guy at the College of Law. So let's unmute and thank Francis. And next up is Sam Husseini in just a minute. He's going to talk about the political implications of all of this. So if we can unmute and thank
Thanks
Francis.
so much, Professor.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you.
Dr. Boyle.
Thank you.
Terrific. All right. So next we have Medea. She's going to introduce.
Thank
Sam.
you.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Sam Husseini, who I've known for many a decade. And you might have seen him in the press conferences of the State Department asking difficult questions, so difficult that they don't like calling on him. He is a Jordanian-Palestinian independent journalist based here in Washington, D.C., the founder of VotePAC, which fosters left-right cooperation. He's also communications director for the Institute for Public Accuracy, which is a consortium of policy analysts. He has written articles for The Nation, Washington Post, USA Today, Salon, Counterpunch, and his latest articles on Substack raise very, very interesting issues, such as, is the International Criminal Court itself criminal? Are arrested student protesters the ones actually upholding international law? So thank you so much for joining us, Sam.
Thank you so much, Medea. I'll try to keep it brief and have hopefully lots of time for discussion. And let me sort of, as we were talking about what the ICC is doing, what the ICJ is doing, what other countries are doing, the WikiLeaks phrase, courage is contagious, came to mind. That if we can get into this modality of different people feeding off of each other and doing things, that would be ideal. I do want to, talk a little bit about both the ICJ and the ICC, but I really want to sort of from the top mention what I think is sort of the conclusion for one of the next major steps, and that's to try to get the General Assembly to really rev things up. People might recall after South Africa, I was very involved using Professor Boyle's legal analysis in getting getting a country to invoke the Genocide Convention at the International Court of Justice, which South Africa finally did at the end of 2023. After that point, we tried to get other countries to do declarations of intervention to basically back up the South African case. And a lot of activism went into that, and that was very good. Several countries have, not enough. Some countries say that they will, but haven't yet, like Jordan and Egypt. Lately, the General Assembly in the United Nations has been focusing on getting Palestine as a member. It can do a lot more. And I think now is a very good time to push for that. There's activism on the street in New York from the student protests. And with both the ICJ and the ICC now acting, I think that is a very good opportunity to put pressure on the General Assembly, to assert itself. This isn't just about Palestine. This is about global governance, and this is about the notion that the International Court of Justice can say that Israel must stop all genocidal acts, and then a resolution is put forward at the Security Council for a ceasefire, and all the U.S. has to do is raise their hands, and that's the end of the story. The U.S. vetoes it, and that's it. Well, the General Assembly has a mechanism called Uniting for Peace, which basically is a way for the General Assembly to assert itself over the Security Council when there's a member on the Security Council that is preventing the Security Council from fulfilling its actual responsibility. That is to ensure global security, which the United States is obviously preventing the Council and the UN from doing. So I think that that's the next important step. We don't know what's in the heads of Karim Khan. I think that Francis is probably right, and I think he implied this, I know lots of other people have, that basically they almost needed to do it at this point, potentially, just simply to maintain some level of international legitimacy, especially in the global South. That is, if a genocide can take place and the ICC still doesn't act, then it's a farce. And people have been urging the ICC to act for a very, very, very long time on Israel-Palestine. And it has only gone after, up until now, African leaders and people calling it the Caucasian Criminal Court, International Caucasian Court, and Putin. So Khan has really done the bidding of the US and NATO up until this point. So we really could be at an inflection point, and I think we need to use it to the full extent. What he did file was troubling in a number of ways. There was no genocide mentioned in the charges. I hope that isn't used to undermine the South African genocide case. And there was more material on Hamas, including torture and rape, than on Israel, which didn't include rape and torture charges. And there was no mention of prior crimes by Israel for all of these decades. It was only stuff since the October 7th, nothing on the occupation, nothing on apartheid. I do think that it will really sort of galvanize Europe, and it'll put them in a tough spot, right? I mean, unlike the US, which is now revving up to attack the ICC, European states pretend to pay lip service to international law. So, Germany, France, et cetera, will be sort of in a tough spot as to how they deal with this. So I think that there'll be an opening for a lot of activism a lot of activism there. Um, um, I think, I asked Francis about putting pressure on the 3-judge panel. I'll try to get their contact information as quickly as possible, and urge people to be urging them to follow the law and possibly develop some kind of letter to get that going. And let me end it there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sam Husseini, so great to have you with us on CODEPINK Congress. Medea is going to join us as well for some questions. Let's revisit Uniting for Peace, this resolution, how it works, whether it has to be invoked or is it already invoked. And a lot of people don't realize that the General Assembly could override a veto at the Security Council by voting, I think, by a 2/3 majority to do so under this resolution. So tell us about it and your vision of how it could be used to end this genocide that we are witnessing in real time.
Right. What you lay out there is correct. You need 2/3, and ideally it would be it started to be invoked at some point after October 7th, and it's been invoked, I think, about a dozen times since the 1950s. Oftentimes by the U.S. against Russia or the Soviet Union. The U.S. invoked it against the Soviet Union regarding the Korean War, which is why the Korean War was fought under a UN flag. U.S. invoked it against Russia on Ukraine. It sort of got invoked, and then it sort of went into hibernation. And I sense that it's a bit of cowardice by the Palestinian delegation, frankly, at the UN. They are intimidated by the US and Israel. Palestinian ranks are divided. You have the PA and you have Hamas, and PA controls the UN seat. You've had a lot of countries say a lot of brave things regarding Palestine, from Brazil to Russia to China, to Algeria, to Turkey, and so on. But the only ones that have really put their shoulder to the wheel are South Africa and Nicaragua by putting forward their cases at the ICJ. So I think that very polite but firm pressure on a lot of other countries, Malaysia and Indonesia, there are a whole list of countries that have said what Israel is doing is genocide, but they, other than voting at the General Assembly for a ceasefire, they really haven't done anything.
So just to follow up, if they are to meet under the Uniting for Peace resolution, you're saying that we want countries to be pushing not only for a ceasefire, but for suspension, perhaps, of Israel from the United Nations, for
Correct.
a criminal tribunal before the United Nations, for an embargo on arms, oil, and tech to Israel? Yes?
Yes, correct. Thank you. Both Francis Boyle and Craig Mokhiber, the UN whistleblower, have outlined a whole series of things that could be done, urging countries to break diplomatic relations with Israel, suspending Israel from participation in the General Assembly. But I think the things that you point to are even more important. An arms embargo. You could even try to set up a tribunal. Actually, that doesn't matter anymore right now, because we had been talking about using Uniting for Peace to set up a tribunal since the ICC wouldn't act, but now the ICC has acted. So I guess we can put that idea to the side. But certainly an arms embargo and other actions can be called on by economic sanctions, can be called on by in Uniting for Peace resolutions.
Thank you, Medea.
Well, you mentioned, Sam, 2 countries, Jordan and Egypt, that said that they would participate in the ICJ, but do you think that was just for public opinion? Is there anything serious? And then, other than it's Colombia, what other countries have already signed on?
Libya signed on recently. Yeah, and I heard that very recently that Ireland would. So I guess going along with them recognizing Palestine, I suspect that Ireland will follow up. I don't know if it's just posturing or if Jordan and Egypt, and I think there were one or two other.
Turkey also.
It might have been Turkey. Some other Muslim countries said that they would some time ago and have not done anything yet. I don't know what the reasons for that are.
Well, at Code Pink, we've been visiting some of the UN missions and consulates and asking Mexico to weigh in because AMLO is the head of Mexico. They're facing elections. Now's the time to act. So we'll keep pressing on that.
Right.
Any other questions, Medea?
You've also had countries say things like really excoriating the U.S. veto. The Malaysian prime minister about a month or two ago was just like, this is ridiculous. We have to reform the United Nations and so on and so forth. That's a good statement as far as it goes, but how do you achieve that? And I think that, forcing the Uniting for Peace process is part of the way that we continue to highlight the problem of global governance to eventually, reform the United Nations in this way.
Well, I don't know if there's anything stopping the General Assembly from forever meeting under the Uniting for Peace resolution and basically eviscerating or disempowering the Security Council.
It's a matter of political will. I'm sure that the United States will probably attempt to, take reprisals against countries who try to spearhead those efforts. I'm sure that there are tentacles of the, U.S. establishment that, want to go after South Africa now. They've already wanted to go after Nicaragua for other reasons. So it's kind of like a solidarity question, in a union we are strong kind of thing. So will the global South and other countries and people of conscience be able to pressure their countries into doing the right thing and genuinely taking a stand here or not?
So we have a question here from Cynthia Papermaster saying, who or what entity would enact an arms embargo? Could it be the UN General Assembly?
Yeah, well, the UN General Assembly would call for it, and then you would, have to, it becomes a major project for people to shame and name the countries that are violating it. Once you have if you can get 2/3 of the countries of the world under Uniting for Peace to say this shouldn't happen, then that becomes a process of effectively saying the U.S. is violating this resolution under Uniting for Peace by the United Nations. The U.S. government will say Uniting for Peace isn't binding. That's somewhat debatable, but they even said that a UN resolution wasn't binding. They finally let a UN Security Council resolution through calling for a ceasefire in the last week and a half of Ramadan, if you remember. And then the next day, the U.S. government, it was the first one that they didn't veto. And then the next day, the U.S. government is out there saying, "Oh, this isn't binding." Where the hell did they get that? So,
I think ultimately it's a matter of political will, as you said. But I think this is a great time. I mean, this is a crucial time with the ICC prosecutor seeking the arrest warrants that really gives people the cover, the justification for imposing an arms embargo and for politically pushing that. Medea.
Oh, I just wanted to mention there are a couple of very good resources that people have been putting into the chat. So folks might want to take a look at Intercept article, Al Jazeera debate that happened. And also I wondered, I wanted to let people know that on Thursday, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, is going to be testifying in Congress. So that should be interesting. And Sam, because you do go to these State Department briefings, could you just tell us something about what that is like and how do you go about getting some difficult questions asked?
It's maddening. You're in the same room as somebody who you're convinced is fronting for genocide, and you're supposed to play by these rules of, journalistic decorum. They rarely call the main guy, Miller, very rarely calls on me. I think he's only called on me once since October 7th. But just on Monday, yesterday, was it Monday? Yeah, yesterday. Wow, time flies. got in there and he was, denouncing the ICC and so on. And he got through, answering Matt Lee's question, the AP reporter, and I blurted out, you were really quick to applaud the ICC when they went after Russia, which they were. Then I had like some tech problems and stuff, so I left early, and I knew he wouldn't call on me, so I had other things to do. And then I found out later in the day, Matt Lee picked up that same thread. The hypocrisy is so much they're outright lying now. He outright claimed, when Matt Lee was sort of pressuring him, well, what's the difference between this case and Russia? He had two forms of argument, both of which were false. One was saying that Palestine isn't a legitimate member of the ICC. It is, they are saying because it's not a state. If you go to the ICC webpage, it's listed. It joined in 2015 as the State of Palestine. It's listed on the webpage. And then he said that even though Russia isn't a member of the ICC, Ukraine is. No, it's not. So they lied, claiming that it applies to Russia and not Israel because Palestine isn't a member and because Ukraine is, when in fact it's the exact opposite. Palestine is a member and Ukraine isn't. So the hypocrisies are piling on so deep that they're just, outright lying. They usually get away with not lying. They usually get away with just deceiving or evading or whatever. But the contradictions are so much that just outright lying.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sam Husseini. We have a Capitol calling party up next in which we're going to ask members of Congress to speak out publicly in support of the ICC arrest warrants, to say that it's time the United States uphold international law, join the International Criminal Court, and oppose any attempts by Republicans and some Democrats to sanction these judges at the ICC, should they agree with the prosecutor that we need arrest warrants to be sought against Israel's top leaders. So thank you so much, Sam Husseini. Let's unmute and thank Sam for joining us on CODEPINK Congress.
Thank you.
Sam, it was a great
Sam.
discussion.
Sam.
Thank you,
Thank you
Sam.
for all the hard
Thank you so
questions.
much.